Hey guys, it's that small tantric again, and today's video will be just a history about my health and my battle with kidney failure. Once again, I will be looking at my notes because it's a hefty one. So let's begin. Oh hello, we've got a little intruder. So to begin with, I have congenital nephrotic syndrome of the Finnish type. To break it down, congenital means diagnosed before the age of 1. Anything beginning with neph is always kidneys, and of the Finnish type is country of origin. It is hereditary, it affects 1 in 4 children, and in my family's case, it affected myself and my older brother. Nephrotic syndrome is when your kidneys start leaking out protein and essentially poisoning you from the inside. And that was what was happening to me as a baby. My kidneys were very slowly poisoning me. However, I was very lucky in that they managed to save my kidneys up until I was about 3, until I needed a double nephrectomy, which is removal of both kidneys. This was done in one surgery. Once both kidneys were removed, I had what is called a Tenchkov inserted. A Tenchkov is a catheter, and I started doing CAPD dialysis. CAPD stands for continuous ambulatory peritoneal dialysis. This is when you have a Tenchkov catheter, it's called, in your belly and somewhere around the peritoneum, as you would imagine, and that is where you dialyze. This was done every night, so in reality it didn't affect me too much. Along with this, I had a feeding tube, because with kidney failure you get nausea, you get lack of appetite, and with pediatric patients they tend to come with feeding tubes just because it's easier. I don't know about the adults, I cannot tell you. When I was on CAPD, I felt like I led a mostly normal life. What got in the way of that was I got called for a transplant at my hospital in London, Great Ormond Street Hospital. You might have heard about it, and that was where I was seen as a patient. I mentioned in a previous video that I used to come to England since I was a baby, essentially for my health concerns, and I was a Great Ormond Street patient. When I was about 5-6, I had a donor, apparently a 5-year-old little boy, and the transplant failed. The transplant lasted 3 days, and it was extremely unsuccessful. It started poisoning me from the inside. I had my gallbladder removed. I had about 7 surgeries in 10 days. I was in an induced coma, all that kind of thing. I obviously don't remember most of it. After that, I couldn't go back to CAPD because the more they open and close you in surgery, the more exposed you are to what is called antibodies, and the higher the antibody count is in your body, I don't know the ins and outs exactly, but since all my surgeries were very in my belly, bringing in something else would have just been bigger cause for confusion. So I started doing hemodialysis, which is done through a catheter that goes directly into your main artery. This hemodialysis is extremely different to CAPD in that it's 4 hours a week, 3 times a week, or 4, I was on alternate days. And dialysis is very draining. I handled it very well. I always I still did things after dialysis and whatnot, but it drains you. You're literally removing most of your blood, getting it cleaned, and it's coming back into you. So it's very strenuous on the body. It leaves you feeling extremely dizzy. It leaves you feeling nauseous, lethargic. So, apart from that, as a dialysis patient, your fluid is restricted. You have no kidneys. Since I had no kidneys, I couldn't pass any urine. So again, if you drink too much, you drown yourself from the inside. When I started, I had a limit of about 500 mils a day. So I lived in a country that has 300 days of summer, so that was fun. I couldn't eat anything high in potassium. I could have it in small quantities, but for example, there are some berries which are very high in potassium, and once my aunt unknowingly gave me a cup of berries that almost killed me. I ended up needing a session and a half of dialysis. Instead of my usual 4 hours, I needed 6. So bananas are very high, oranges, chocolate, so that was quite a hard one. The chocolate, I remember. But also, long years of dialysis and kidney failure and everything, it does things to your body. My bones were extremely brittle. They still are, but they're a lot better now. When I was about 8, 9, I needed crutches till I was about 12, 13 due to how bad my legs had gotten. Luckily, I'm a lot better now. I needed wheelchairs at a point. I have an enlarged liver from all the meds that come with it. Our skin is this weird yellowy color because the toxins, you're not expelling them the natural way most people do, so they try to leave from the skin. You always have a bad taste in your mouth, so it's quite a constant illness. In about 3 years down the line of doing that hemodialysis, I had an AV brachial fistula in my arm. A surgically made fistula essentially is a passageway that's created between the main vein and main artery, and imagine, like a house has all the pipes and whatnot, water pipes. It's like surgeons implant a main pipe in your body so that continuous amounts of blood is passing through that passageway, and you get a good clearance, like a good wash of your blood in the machines. So yes, that is a fistula. I have a very, very good fistula. It is still alive and kicking. It's 17 years old now, so it's a good one. I'm very, very lucky in that department. When I first had my fistula, I was one of the youngest patients in Malta to ever have a fistula, point blank period. Usually you're meant to use 2 entry points, and it's done via needles. I'm not talking about little baby needles here. Anyone in medicine knows the lower you go in size of needles, the bigger it is. So a 20 needle is significantly thinner than a 14 one, which is what I use. I use the biggest ones by the end, and they're about this long and that thick. So as I said, it's literally it's like a main pipe in a house. But when I first started dialysis, when I first started using my fistula, I couldn't get used to the double needle, it's called. I used to since I was so young, I got away with a lot at the renal unit I was in. I love that place. I still love and respect the people who raised me, essentially. But I was definitely troublesome in that area, and I got away with single-use needle for about 2.5 years. And always doing these weird bits with the nursing officer in charge and whatnot. Yeah, I was quite, as I said, since being a child patient, being one of very, very few child patients and being one of the first, there's a lot of confidence which you wouldn't have with the usual nurse or doctor. And you do end up being a little family, honestly. When I turned about 15, 16, we started discussing prospects of transplants. Again, due to being opened and closed so many times during my younger days, I'm extremely difficult to transplant. My type of transplant is called an HLA incompatible, which means human leukocyte antigen, and I needed something called plasma exchange to to clean my blood from all these antibodies. Plasma exchange is done exactly in the same manner as dialysis, i.e. via the fistula, and literally they separate your blood from its plasma and they give you new, cleansed, so to speak, plasma. I had quite a number of sessions of these, and they are like dialysis on steroids. I could take dialysis sessions, plasma exchange sessions, knocked it out of the park. I was a mess for the rest of the day and half the next day. I'm not sure why exactly, but you can't have many sessions, or at least I couldn't have many sessions in one go, so I always had to have a few months in between every session. But yes, we started discussing it when I was about 16, and I was not prepared for it, guys. As I mentioned, my older brother, he sadly passed away 6 months after receiving a successful transplant. My history with transplants was, as in my personal story, was horrendous, so I did not have good things to say about transplants. But we gave it some time, and at about 19 I was ready for it. So we went ahead, and it was honestly life-changing. When I say life-changing, I always thought, when I say life-changing, I mean I was the kind of patient who never thought dialysis was a big deal. Like, it is a big deal, but I mostly went on with my life. I never let it get in the way of things. I mean, I had to at times, but I did a lot in spite of it. But when you think your eyesight's only a little bit bad and you go to the opticians, and then you put on the pair of glasses and you're like, damn, I was really, really blind. Getting a transplant, for me, that is the only way I can explain it. I didn't realize how sick I was till I wasn't. Food tasted incredible, like that was, suddenly my color changed overnight, and it hasn't been plain sailing, far from it, far from it. But it has been good. It has been very good. And yeah, it's a new lease on life completely. For my last dialysis session, I don't think I could ever forget it. I remember the room I was in at my current hospital. I remember the nurse who put me on, it was just so surreal, and I remember not being able to come to terms with not having a dialysis session planned. It's weird, but dialysis was constant in my life, and my life has always been anything but, so it was just very surreal. And the surgery itself, it was beyond terrifying. Both myself and my aunt, who is my donor, could opt out till we were getting wheeled into surgery. I never doubted my aunt, but I doubted myself a lot. Like, I remember being wheeled down to surgery and thinking, literally wanting to jump out of bed and being like, nope, don't want to do this. I do not want to do this. I also signed a DNR and told my consultant that if anything happens, I would not want to be resuscitated time and time again. That is not a life I would want. So it was there was a lot to think about, and I'm sure my aunt has the same to say. I mean, in that it's a massive decision. You know, it wasn't just, a transplant is available and yes, I want this. It was never like that for me. The fear was always, for a very long time, the fear was a lot greater than the want. Next day, I remember I was forced out of bed because mobility after surgery is highly encouraged to avoid things like embolisms and things like this. I remember thinking, oh my god, this is torture, why are they doing this to me? Because the surgery, it's at the bottom of your abdomen, so when you're moving your legs, there's that stretch and everything. Yeah, it was. I had a regular catheter in, and I couldn't believe I was peeing again for the first time in 16 years. My cousin was very kindly walking me. I was using a walking frame to hold on to while he held my catheter bag, my pee bag. I have some lovely cousins, I do. And yes, my catheter was bypassing its cord, and that's not inserted properly, and I may have ended up weighing on his feet a bit. It's, it's the things we do for the people we love. The first year after my transplant, it was definitely difficult. When you get a transplant, you're put on steroids, and I'm not talking like, they make you rage, but they're not bodybuilder steroids, is what I'm trying to say. They're medically prescribed, and they mess with you. One, they send your emotions all over the place. You are a wreck. You're a literal wreck. But beyond that, they give you an appetite. So, to fill you in, I was 43 kilos before the surgery. At my heaviest, and I will be inserting photos for your viewing pleasure, I was at 59 kilos. So, and for you, those of you who don't know me, I am 4'6". So I'll let you come to your own conclusions. I was almost wider than I was tall. But more than that, it's the emotional wreck that you become. I'm still on steroids now, but I'm on a very low dose. Back then I was on something crazy like 20 or 25 milligrams. Yes, I gained so much weight so quickly. I needed a wheelchair. I couldn't walk for long distances. And for example, I remember this one time fully breaking down because I wanted to order this ridiculously sized hot dog, but my family was like, mate, maybe you should be careful, because again, your bones aren't the strongest, and this is quite strenuous on your legs, on your lungs, on your everything. They were Hey guys, if you notice a sudden shift in lighting, it's because my battery died. So I went and watched the last episode of Stranger Things. So it was emotional, okay? I think I was talking about restrictions when it comes to having a transplant. Obviously, well, not obviously if you don't know, but the restrictions aren't nearly as bad as a dialysis patient, but they are fairly bad in that I'm immunocompromised now, meaning I'm very susceptible to infections. I struggle about once or twice a year with UTIs and such. I get sick fairly easily, less than I thought I would, but still more than I did as a dialysis patient. Blood transfusions is a big one. Blood transfusions I am not fond of. They increase your antibodies, and the more antibodies you have, the less chance of a transplant. Yes, I have a transplant now, but I'm a 25-year-old with a 6-year-old transplant. Really good kidneys give you 30 to 50 years. Like, that's the ones you hear about. It's not common. It happens. I have a good kidney. The problem is my condition and my antibodies mean that my body just won't accept most kidneys. And again, having a transplant has increased my antibodies yet again. So we want to avoid that. We want to avoid adding any more, because the reality is I will probably need more than one. Well, I'm already on my second transplant, and it's weird. Obviously, I want it to be my one and only good transplant, but I'm realistic in thinking I will probably need another one in the future. And that's the thing about kidney failure. People think that a transplant is a cure. A transplant is just a treatment. There is no cure for kidney failure. There just isn't a cure, That's the sad reality of it. But alas, what has a transplant done for me? It's changed my life. It's given me... I've always loved being independent, but having a transplant obviously completely changed that. I got my own place about just over a year after my first transplant. I have 3 dogs who I raise on my own. I've got my own house which I take care of. I go to the gym 2, 3, 4 times a week. I can go hiking and not get winded within the first 10 minutes of walking. I can enjoy nights out like regular people. I've got a festival coming up, which I definitely wouldn't have been able to do as a transplant patient, needing dialysis every other day. So, it's an entirely different experience, and it's great, and that makes me eternally grateful to my donor, who is my aunt. I'll post a picture with her in a minute. And yeah, that's the end of today's video. I know it's a long one, guys, but I hope you found it informative and interesting. Goodbye and see you next Wednesday.